Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook, and I appreciate your being here this evening. I have a very interesting guest today. We're going to talk about an element of technology that I think you will have had some experience with yourself if you have ever been on the internet, looked at any website, have a tablet or a smartphone, and have you done where you've worked with any kind of application on that phone or browsed at a website or whatever. We're going to talk about some elements that directly affect those companies, those devices, and you. Because with me today is Raj Adev, who's the CEO of a company here in Silicon Valley called Designio. Did I say that right?
You got it right.
Fantastic. So Raj, appreciate your being here on Reference Point. Thanks for coming. I want to start out by asking you the question why you created your own company around this area.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Dave. It's a pleasure to talk to you about this. So I've been working in this field for almost 2 decades now, and there is a unmet need in the industry to design applications that are user-friendly. As I've seen around, while working for larger corporations, that need hasn't been met, and there is a void to be filled. And there are companies like mine who actually help all sizes of companies, whether they are startups or corporations. There is a need for external help, even though they might sometimes have an internet.
Think they can do it themselves.
Exactly.
So you use the term that I hear a lot anyway. I'm also tied to the software industry in some respects, and that was user-friendly. And it seems to me to be something that's sort of an evolving definition or an evolving term, and doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. So when we talk about being user-friendly, what does that mean today here in 2019?
What it means today is, what we've seen in our short digital history is that users' behavior changes based on the environment they're in. Okay. So today, what's happening, if you look at the instantaneous or instant gratification services that are being offered to customers. So for instance, you can tap one button and you have an Uber or a Lyft.
Right.
You tap one click and you can order something from Amazon. You can tap one click and buy an iTunes, music or a video or a movie or anything like that. So the expectations from customers today is to be able to do that in every part of their life. Mm. So the environment is bringing about this change, and when they are offered a website or application that doesn't do that, they are not. They're kind of disappointed, right? And that's when you're gonna start losing your customers, because their expectations are higher based on what they've seen, everything around them, and that applies to applications or for companies that are in consumer space. Right. And it is the same thing in enterprise space.
Really? So in that business to business kind of a realm, I recognize it from the standpoint of the consumer. It's like the instant gratification. It's the now kind of a thing, which is way different than when it was, even 20 years ago.
Right.
Okay. I mean, you think of the websites back in the early 2000s or the mid 90s where they were static. There was a page of information and you read stuff and you click here and you click there and you read more stuff,
right.
And that was pretty much what they were all about. But now, I mean, there's a lot more that goes on in the website. There's video, there's audio, you can order this, you can find that. But so I recognize from the standpoint of the consumer how their behavior patterns have changed. But what I'm hearing you say in your last statement is that the same evolution is happening at the business-to-business level. Did I read that right?
That is correct. Absolutely correct. When you use these applications in your day-to-day life, when you work for a large enterprise or B2B environment, you wonder why the application they use in day-to-day business lives work like their consumer applications. And that's been putting a pressure on enterprises to innovate. And if everything else is the same in terms of technology and infrastructure that's supporting it.
Right.
What is the differentiator for your company? It's the
Right.
experience.
Yeah, okay. Well, yes, I guess that's what it is these days. If you're talking about online, actually, it's not just talking about online. I mean, that concept of experience being the differentiator goes back to the time before we had the internet and people were walking in always to brick and mortar stores. Were they getting better service, more conscientious attention from Nordstrom's than they were from some other place? You know, let's go back into the 80s and the 70s. And if they were, then that's where you tended to go back to because you felt comfortable there.
Exactly.
You felt appreciated there. You felt like you were getting, you were respected there.
Yes.
And is there that same kind of a concept?
It is the same concept. If you go on a website or use an application, it doesn't serve the purpose of why you're visiting them, and you will leave, and that's what currently users do. It's a split-second decision. If the application doesn't serve the purpose, it's quickly uninstalled, and the percentage is very high. Sometimes it is over 90%.
90%?
90% of the times, the application will be uninstalled instantaneously.
Wow.
And same thing with websites. If it doesn't give you what you're looking for, they will leave the site. So it's basically, to your point, it's the same experience.
Well, this concept of good design or user-friendly design sounds like it should be pretty simple.
Yeah.
Is it as simple as it sounds?
It's not. It's deceptively easy or difficult, how you put it.
Okay.
It would, to a layperson, how difficult it could be, put a few form fields here and there and put buttons there, pick your favorite color.
It sounds pretty easy.
It sounds pretty easy.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work that way. Depending on whether it's an application or a website, what you present on the user interface to your users or the customers has to make sense. It has to be contextual, and it has to serve the purpose what they're there for. And you wouldn't know that by just throwing in some elements on the screen.
Right.
They have to flow in an expected flow that user expects from.
But not all users are going to be the same.
That is correct, and that's where it gets a little bit more tricky. And you need to understand who are potential users of your website or the application, and if you drill down even further, you need to understand who are the primary users, right? So, for instance, if you have an application, the primary, if you have 3 different types of users,
right.
You can't possibly design it for all 3 of them. And there will be edge cases where sometimes, your support staff might be able to, may have to support the application.
Sure.
But they use it very rarely. You can't design the application for your support staff, really, can you?
Right.
Right? So if you use the automobile analogy, right? If your purpose is to haul, your little kids across the town, you would buy a minivan.
Right.
You're not going to buy a roadster.
Right.
Right.
And you won't get the Corvette. You
Exactly.
get the yeah.
Exactly. And same thing with pickup trucks. So you get my point, right? It has to be designed for the primary users for their primary usage.
So does that mean that the business has to have multiple websites, or is it the same website is able to kind of like morph and adapt to whoever is that's coming to it?
Yeah. So with the tool set that is available today compared to early 2000s, it is possible to use the same website but present different information based on who it is visiting your site.
Is this as important for the small business as it is for the enterprise? You mentioned how the enterprises are having to realize this, but is the small business, because virtually every business has a website of some type, is it as important to them?
It is extremely important to them as well. And if they're not paying attention to this, their competitors are. And if you don't customize the website for your users' need, you're bound to lose them sooner or later. It is extremely important for small businesses as well.
So, okay. So there are lots of these do-it-yourself website and application design things, WordPress, GoDaddy, they're all over the place, okay? And it's seems to be, it's presented to be pretty easy. Here's a template, you just drop that in and, fill in a few, whatever words you want to put on it on the screen and you're there, okay? And I think a lot of businesses, a lot of small and medium-sized companies especially, are looking at that. I mean, I can see how the larger corporations are thinking about some of the things they need to do, whether it's a General Motors or a Google or somebody or whomever. They're looking at, I need to deal with this, and I've got my technology professionals that I've hired out of MIT or Cal Poly or somebody like that understands the stuff and is going to go build that for me, okay? But the small guy is going to be looking at WordPress and GoDaddy and these other ones whose names escape me at the moment, but there's dozens of them.
Right.
Is that the right path for a small company? Does that help them?
It's the way I look at them as it may help some of them because some users are definitely savvy. They can figure that out. But it is, like I said, that's more like a facade, right? It's saying basically, if I can create a nice facade, it will help my business.
Right.
But the crux of your website or the application is actually interaction design that sits below the visual design, which is the facade I'm referring to. And before you design interaction for your users, as in what screen comes before and after, you also need to understand who it is for, right? And if you show, for instance, a college grad, images of something very business savvy, that they can't really relate to, right? That's not going to work for them. If you're trying to convert your website visitors or application visitors into customers, you need to show them, you need to take them in a step-by-step journey or a sales funnel, so to speak, and bring them to a point where they can make a decision whether to buy a service or a product from you. Right. So just having a nice facade doesn't solve that problem.
Doesn't give you that answer. I want to dig into that just a little bit more deeply, but before we do, there's something I mention. This is an interesting topic, and I think, folks, hopefully you're going to start to begin to see how it actually relates to you. If you have any questions about how this concept of design, user interface, user experience, ease of use sort of thing, if you have any questions about that you would like Raj to get, please send them in to us here at info@referencepointtv.com. I'll make sure he gets them and we'll get the answers to you. So let's go back to the last thing that you were talking about, that beneath the face point, the facade, as you put it, behind that there is activity, there's information, there's logic that's going on, okay? And that seems to me to be the area where it might be a little bit more complex and complicated to figure out what you have to do and how you have to do it in order to present things. Now, you talked about it in terms of if you want to bring a customer to purchase something, but I can see this as being relevant and useful for virtually any kind of a business, for a nonprofit organization, for a church, for the U.S. government, the state of California, when they're trying to get information to people about how they can deal with things. Because a lot of these sites are just like, oh my God, trying to find your way around them is difficult. So how do you approach that concept? How does a company, how does a business person figure that out?
Right. So some of the websites, for instance, are a website like a newspaper or a government organization website. Has tons of information. It can get overwhelming for users. And what happens oftentimes is that even from the organizations and the companies who want to design it for the users, they tend to project their own inside view on the websites. And that's why the verbiage they use, the terminology they use on the website and the menu systems makes total sense to them internally, but it doesn't make sense to the users. Or it may not make sense to them.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you get stuck in this bubble. You know what you're talking about because it's your business or your agency or whatever. But you're not necessarily thinking in terms of how does the person that's going to see this, what's going on in their head.
Yeah.
So is that where organizations like yours or some sort of assistance comes into play to be able to help with this, kind of like shake them up a little bit and make them realize that they have to think differently?
Exactly. So what organizations like mine, what we would do is we'll interview the stakeholders who are trying to accomplish something, understand their objectives, and talk to, once we understand who they are targeting, then we go out and interview what we call it as a UX research, interview the actual
user experience
research, and we'll interview the actual users. And what we try to figure out is, how they think, what their backgrounds are, what their challenges are, and what they're trying to accomplish using this website or application.
What you're talking about is fairly standard marketing thought process. But what I'm hearing you say, on the other hand, is that a high percentage of companies are not applying those same concepts and methodologies to this area of their digital interaction with their customers. And the customer could be internal, it could be your employees, couldn't it?
Yes, that's absolutely right.
Why is that?
Well, again, going back to deceptively easy, we can do this, we know it. We don't need an external, expert to tell us what it, needs to be called. And that's where they get it wrong. And they oftentimes they don't measure what they're losing, right? If you're not measuring, you don't have clear, tangible objectives defined, and if you're not measuring against, you're living in a bliss that we're not missing anything,
right?
But you may be.
Before the show, we were talking a little bit about what makes what would be an example of a site that would, or an app that would be a good one, or something that seems to be relevant and easily usable and whatever. And you mentioned one, and I think we have it here. I think it's the Airbnb site, and I want to have the guys call that up on the screen right now. And what is it about this that makes it qualify as good and a reasonable one?
So Airbnb is one of the best websites out there, and their application too. Now, if you look at comparable businesses, for instance, hotels.
Yes.
Right. They will talk a lot, and they have changed a little bit too. They'll talk a lot about hotel, the premises, and all of that. It's a little bit too. The way to put it is it's a little too cold. This is our property. Do you like that, right?
Yeah, this is where we are. This is who we got. Isn't the pool beautiful?
Yeah,
stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. But what Airbnb is doing is going beyond that, right? Sometimes if you feel like, I just want to go to ocean because of the experience, and then I'll find an Airbnb close by that, right? Or I like to go to mountains, and I'll find an Airbnb around that, right? It's exactly opposite, approach where they're trying to sell you the experience, right? Because what you can do around there, what hotels do usually is this is our property, and these are the interesting things you might find around there,
right? As opposed to, hey, I want to go do X. And I want to do it in this location. Where can I stay?
Exactly.
That's an interesting. I mean, you just having described that, and I hadn't thought about that, but that is a very interesting and different perspective. As a traveler, right? I usually say, I got to go to Las Vegas, so and you go and you just look for a hotel, okay? But that's not exactly and that's what most people do, and they know they're going to travel to a destination. but they're not talking about what kind of experience do they want to have.
Exactly.
They're just looking, So if you can define the experience, in this particular case, if you define the experience, then Airbnb is in a position to identify something in proximity to where that experience would be, and takes a decision point or a problem off your plate.
Exactly.
So how do we use that kind of a similar mindset in the context of business digital applications and websites? Give me another example of a company action that would fit this different perspective.
There are a lot of examples. Apple is probably one of the best examples. Everyone uses iOS apps. If you take any Apple application, let's take an example of calendars. Apple has calendars, and how well organized calendars are. You can see a day view, month view, yearly view, or just a list. And it automatically, because there is an email app on your phones, it automatically looks for potential events or meetings and suggests you, do you want to add this to your calendar? Yes, you could manually do that, but having that suggestion makes it very easy for you to just add to that.
Yeah, sure. Right. Okay, all right. So we have just maybe 5 or 6 minutes left in the time that we have together. And what I was hoping that we could do in this last 5 or 6 minutes, Raj, is to talk a little bit more about the importance and how to go about assisting for the small and medium-sized enterprise. I mean, I have a tremendous amount of respect for small and medium-sized enterprises. I mean, you're a small business.
Yes.
But the point of the fact is that's the engine that drives the economy,
right.
Okay? And so in this digital age, if you're not taking advantage of the newer technologies and the understanding of how the consumer or your visitor on an app or the website wants to deal with things, if you're not comprehending that, then you stand to lose. So give me a couple of thoughts and ideas and tips for the small and medium-sized enterprise.
What I would say is, I work with a lot of startups too, and they wrestle with similar problem. We don't have enough cash, so this must be expensive. This may take a lot of money to do this. Not true. What you can do is you don't always have to hire a big name agency. You can hire experts. You don't have to hire them full time. Mm-hmm. You can hire them part time, and hire them for a specific goal, right? And accomplish that, right? And see if they are meeting your performance goals. Set those performance goals for yourself or for that hire, and say, what I'm looking out of this engagement is, my bottom line going up by whatever percentage, and if the experts that you hire, if they're really good, they should be able to commit to something close to that, right? And that's how you would hire them, and like I said, hire them for performance. So you pay them if they perform.
That makes a lot of sense, and I hadn't thought of. I mean, I know that we're in an economic environment where you hire someone on a contract basis, but I can see where the view is, gosh, it's gonna be a lot of money.
Yeah.
You don't even know what it's going to be, but you're thinking it's going to be a lot of money. Yeah. But tying it to the business's revenue in terms of what you want to get out of these things, I think that's very interesting and relevant. How do you figure that out? How do you know? I mean, is there a process that the business can go through to try to figure out what seems to be reasonable? Because you could come up and say, "Well, if I'm going to do this, I want 1,000% increase." I mean, that's unrealistic.
That's right.
How do you go about getting something real?
So what you would do is, you would look at similar businesses or in a similar area. You're obviously not going to be an outlier, right? You're not going to be making less than rest of the group that that you belong to, the sector or similar stores or for small business, similar companies. Also, you're not going to break out and make a lot more than rest of them. So that's the average you want to compare to. If you're falling behind, you're obviously not doing something right that rest of them are doing, right? And you can also do slightly better than them if you strategize well, right? So that's how I would decide on how to.
What seems to make sense. Exactly. That's actually, and I think that's. I chuckle here because I have experienced firsthand how the decisions made in the bubble can really not get you very far, and you keep spinning your wheels and doing the same thing over and over again, having just an outside influence. I mean, the thing that you just mentioned is so brute simple, but it's like an aha moment. All right, I mean, it was like, oh yeah, of course. Why didn't I think of that? Seriously. And that's like but that's the importance of bringing in somebody that knows and understands the arena, okay? And the fact that you don't have to hire somebody for $1 million, you can hire them on a project basis for a particular accomplishment, and I think is significant. Well, we're down to the point where we're pretty much out of time here, and I really want to thank you for coming. We covered a lot of area, and I think that we covered most of the key things that I wanted to accomplish. We didn't look at as many of the slides as I had hoped for, but that's beside the point because you've mentioned all the key things that we needed to talk about. So in the closing moments, do you have any parting words?
Well, I would talk about Dieter Rams, German design guru.
Oh, he was slide number one? Sure, bring him up, yeah.
What I would say is, a lot of businesses, whether they are launching a website, redesigning a website or application, tend to provide overwhelm users with a lot of information because they think that everything is important,
right.
And they think that everything is equally important, and that's where users are burdened with unnecessary information. What Dieter Rams talks about good design is as little as possible.
As little as possible.
So you remove everything unnecessary, and show what is only essential, and that will help users make decisions quickly. And that's how you're going to, win your customers.
Fantastic, and a great way to end the show. So, Raj, thank you very much. I appreciate your being here. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've learned something. I know I have, and we appreciate your watching. So, thank you for being there again, and we'll see you next time on Reference Point.
Thank you for having me, Dave.